Long before there were banks, before governments drafted constitutions, before borders were drawn and redrawn by wars and treaties, there was gold. And beside it, less glamorous, less mythologized, yet no less essential, stood silver. They were not inventions. They were not policies. They were not ideas. They were facts of nature, pulled from the earth long before humanity learned how to name power. Civilizations have always tried to convince themselves that progress means replacement, that each new system makes the old one obsolete. But history tells a quieter, less flattering story. When complexity collapses, when trust evaporates, when institutions fracture under their own weight, humanity does not invent something new. It reverts. Gold and silver do not chase relevance. They do not lobby governments. They do not market themselves as solutions. They simply wait, and they have always been there at the end. From the earliest recorded civilizations, gold and silver were not chosen by humans because they were fashionable or convenient. They were chosen because they solved a problem no system has ever permanently solved. Trust between strangers. In ancient Egypt around 2600 BC, gold was already associated with permanence, divinity, and continuity. Pharaohs were buried with it not merely as decoration, but as a belief that gold transcended death itself. It did not corrode. It did not decay. It looked the same in the tomb as it did in the sunlight. To ancient minds, this was not symbolism. It was evidence. Silver, meanwhile, emerged as a practical counterpart, less rare, more workable, easier to divide. Where gold represented eternity, silver represented exchange. Where gold anchored treasuries, silver moved through hands. As empires expanded, monetary systems evolved, but the underlying materials remained constant. The Roman Empire struck gold aurei for the state and silver denarii for the people. Soldiers were paid in silver. Merchants priced goods in silver. Taxes, fines, and contracts were settled in metal, not promises. When Rome debased its currency, reducing the silver content of coins to fund wars and political excess, the collapse was not philosophical. It was mechanical. Trust vanished as metal disappeared. Prices exploded. Trade slowed. The empire fractured from within before it fell from without. This was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern. Across the Islamic Caliphates, gold dinars and silver dirhams circulated across vast territories with different languages, cultures, and rulers. They worked not because everyone trusted the caliph, but because everyone trusted the metal. A merchant in Damascus accepted silver from Cairo not because of politics, but because silver weighed the same everywhere. Medieval Europe repeated the same formula. Kings rose and fell, borders shifted, plagues erased populations, but silver pennies continued to price bread, labor, and land. The word salary itself traces back to salarium, a payment connected to salt and silver, because both were essential, divisible, and universally valued. Silver was never about wealth concentration. It was about participation. When paper promises failed, silver coins did not disappear from history. They reappeared, often unofficially, in markets, villages, and informal trade networks. When centralized authority weakened, metal did not wait for permission to resume its role. Gold served continuity. Silver served survival. The modern world likes to imagine that it broke this cycle in the 20th century, that humanity finally graduated from primitive money into a managed, scientific, flexible system. But what actually happened was not progress. It was a deliberate removal of constraints. In 1933, the United States confiscated gold from its citizens. Ownership was criminalized not because gold had failed, but because it limited state power. A government that promises more than it can deliver must eventually silence the referee. In 1965, silver was removed from U.S. coinage. The explanation was technical. The consequence was profound. Money stopped being a thing and became a symbol. Value stopped being inherent and became declarative. Governments celebrated flexibility. Citizens unknowingly accepted fragility. From that moment forward, money was no longer a settlement asset. It was a claim on future productivity, productivity that might never materialize. Debt replaced discipline. Expansion replaced restraint. The 21st century did not invent this reality. It inherited it. Today, every major fiat currency is backed not by reserves, but by confidence in perpetual growth and political stability. Debt is rolled over with more debt. Crises are solved with larger promises. Central banks create liquidity not as an exception, but as a baseline function. Bitcoin emerged as a reaction to the system, not to replace gold, but to expose a problem. It encoded scarcity into software. It removed human discretion from monetary issuance. It challenged the idea that trust must flow through institutions. In this sense, Bitcoin and gold are not enemies. They are mirrors. Both reject arbitrary expansion. Both resist political dilution. Both exist outside direct control. But they differ in one crucial way. Gold survives without electricity. Silver trades without networks. They do not require belief in code, updates, or infrastructure. They do not fail gracefully. They simply do not fail. After the financial crisis of 2008, something quietly changed. While public rhetoric dismissed gold as outdated, central banks reversed decades of policy and began accumulating it again. Not loudly, not ideologically, practically. Gold was reclassified not as an investment, but as insurance. No press conferences announced this shift. No textbooks were rewritten. But balance sheets told the story clearly. When the architect of fiat quietly hedged with metal, the message is unmistakable. They do not trust permanence to promises. History shows that every monetary system follows the same arc. It begins with sound money, something scarce, difficult to produce, resistant to manipulation. Trust builds. Trade expands. Power centralizes. Control replaces constraint. Abuse becomes invisible until it becomes catastrophic. Then collapse occurs, not always dramatically, but inevitably. And when the dust settles, when systems are rewritten, when currencies are renamed, gold and silver are still there, untouched, unimpressed. They do not compete with systems. They outlast them. The modern debate frames everything as a choice. Dollar versus Bitcoin, digital versus physical, innovation versus tradition. But this framing misunderstands history. This was never about choosing one. Fiat serves control. Crypto serves resistance. Metal serves survival. Gold and silver do not overthrow systems. They remain when systems overthrow themselves. They are not the future. They are the constant. And in a world built entirely on promises of growth, stability, repayment, and control, constants quietly become priceless.